We're started.
Great. Welcome, everyone. This is our regular monthly DOE WAP Trainers Consortium call. The main topic today is going to be a conversation, so if you feel comfortable with it, please do turn on your cameras when we get to the part where we're talking. It might be easier to see everybody and not talk over each other. If you put it on grid view, then you can kind of see everybody all at once. But before that, I wanted to show you all a picture of my attack squirrel that attacked me yesterday morning. This one isn't actually the squirrel in question, but it was quite an adventure. The rodents around here are going crazy. Let's start with updates from Anna from IREC.
Thank you, Kelly. Very quick update from IREC. Obviously, we continue to provide support for credentialing program activities. So if you're at a training center that is looking to apply or renew credentials, please reach out for support. The main project that I wanted to share with the Trainers Consortium today is a new initiative that IREC is working on. It's through a DOE-funded initiative called Empowered. It's a combined BTO, VTO, the Vehicle Technology Office, and CTO offering. And the project is focused on providing new training and resources for primarily code officials around grid interactive, energy efficient technology. A lot of this technology still isn't mainstream, but if any of the training centers are working on new grid interactive technology and they would like to serve as an SME or just provide input on the kind of resources we're developing for code officials, we would love to hear from you. If you're working with manufacturers who are bringing this type of equipment online and you think they might be good to provide input on the kind of resources that code officials would benefit from, again, would love to hear from you. I will put my email address in the chat if you or know of anyone who would like to participate. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Any follow-up questions for Anna about that before we go on to Juliana?
Anna, what's the timeline for that project?
That's a great question. I believe it is a 3-year project. I think there is going to be a lot of development of resources in the first year and then some outreach and the ability to provide ongoing kind of updates to those resources. But I will confirm because I wasn't actually on the FOA development team. But I know that we have quite a few years to develop and maintain these resources. And they're going to be hosted on a shared website with SEAC, if any of you have been involved with them before, so that will provide kind of a clearinghouse for these types of resources on new technology, primarily again geared at code officials, but also very relevant for installers and others in the industry.
Thanks. Okay, Juliana from NREL, why don't you give us your update?
Yeah, hi folks, Juliana Williams from NREL. Just the one update that I have for you all is, I know on a previous call, we mentioned that there's the upcoming Weatherization Training Providers Summit in July. Just wanted to give you a heads up that we're going to have registration go live next week. So you should expect to see an email with the registration information and the link to the registration site, which has the agenda and list of speakers. And just as a reminder, you know, we really want to make sure that we're getting folks with a range of experiences from the various training centers. So please keep in mind some of your colleagues who might not be as active in this group. We certainly want to bring them in and be engaged in this free virtual summit that we're hosting in July.
Great, thanks, Juliana. Jonathan, are you ready with updates from NASCASP?
Yes, can you hear me all right?
Yeah. Oh, and if anyone wants to share any files or a screen, just let us know. We can switch it over really easily.
All right, so our main announcement is that we're having our new manager training next week, May 10th through the 14th. And this is really geared towards state grantee managers that are new to their position. And registration can be done on our website. We've also, NASCASP has signed a memorandum of understanding with the American Institute of Building Sciences. And we're hoping to make a training conduit with veterans who have been recently released of service. So it's in its initial stages, but there will be hopefully a lot more to talk about that in the future. And the last thing is we've been working on updating the wage surveys that we've been doing well, all across the land, and 26 states have had their state level data returned to them, and then we're working with our friends at NREL to do a little bit further data analysis. So there will be more to come on that. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. And CAP said they didn't have any updates, BPI also, and normally I would show you any new guidance, but we don't have any since our last call, I don't think. Phil Hull, are you on the call? We were emailing about, he maybe had an update. I don't see him though. Okay, I'll follow up with him and maybe we can send it out via email. Well, to jump into the meat of it, what I'm hoping to do with the rest of our time today is I want to start with a quick review for those of you who didn't live through ARA in 2009, that big, $5 billion, how much ever it was. It was a lot of gray hairs and heart attacks. But I want to do a quick review for those of you who maybe didn't live through that about what we did the first time around, and then just open up the conversation so that we can get ideas flowing in this group about lessons learned, things we think that if we can think of things that could be done differently or better, and really mainly like what we can be doing now to lay the groundwork for a smoother ramp up and maybe a smoother ramp down. These discussions have been going on for quite a while, but I think there's a lot that we could be doing. So anyway, just to jump right in, for those of you who weren't around for the first round, we got this huge amount of funding, and then it basically turned into 3 years of, I think the saying is, building the airplane while you're flying it. We got all that funding. We finally were able to go out to visit states, DOE was, that they hadn't been to in a while, discovered quality issues. They had already developed a whole TNTA plan for the money that got to stay at DOE. And that's where we got the things like the quality work plan, the standard work specifications, the worker certification schemes and exams, the training center accreditation, the whole idea of Tier 1, Tier 2 training, now called comprehensive and specific. Some of the things that didn't really have the same staying power, we also invested heavily in an online training platform. We called it the National Weatherization Training Platform, and seeded it with a bunch of material that's gone now. We did the national evaluation, so that money funded that big, huge national evaluation that did the retrospective, and then also looked at homes done prior to ARA and then done with ARA. Another big thing was that, and this is going to happen again, when we get that kind of stimulus funding, 3 big things really. It tips the scale where it triggers a couple grant programs, CERC and WIP. So some of you on this call were involved in those. They did things like micro wind, looking at different solar, like community scale weatherization, or some that are just coming to mind. There are a lot of different programs that were tried under those grant programs. So that's two of the three big things. The third one, which is more of a tough administrative burden, is it kicks in the Davis-Bacon wage requirements, which, you know, paying people that wage turned out to be less of a problem than the administrative burden of having to pay. I think it's, you have to pay every week or 2 weeks, and you have to report everyone's wages, and if they're working across lines, like one county might have one wage and a different county a different. So the tracking and reporting for the local, especially the small mom and pop contractors, can be a little overwhelming and make them not want to be part of the program. Oh, we got a question in the chat. Oh, sorry, I missed a couple things in the chat. So I think those are the big things. Paul, I'm sorry, I missed your note. What did you want to add?
So this goes back to before you were starting on this. I thought I would share with folks. It's okay. It's okay. I thought I would share with folks that there's a group, National Center for Healthy Housing, is advocating for a large amount of money to go through HUD that would be accessible by, say, weatherization agencies on top of current weatherization efforts. So it wouldn't tip into health and safety budgets or average cost per unit or anything like that, to replace lead painted windows in the name of trying to reduce lead poisoning of children. And so they are interested in getting people to sign on to their letter to Congress that advocates for this in the first place, and they're working on some drop-in language for the infrastructure bill legislation. So I just thought I would put that out there, and if people are interested, I can, Kelly, share with you the link to that letter for people, and you can share it within the notes if people wanted to sign on to support that effort. We've run it through the Building Performance Association Policy Committee, and I think we're going to sign on to it because it doesn't take away from weatherization. It's really on top of, which seems like a good idea. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Yeah, feel free, if you want to just drop that link into the chat too, I will send that. We also had a note from David Heppenstall, which kind of goes in with the Davis-Bacon wage stuff a little bit, asking Jonathan to provide a little more detail about the wage study, specifically which staff categories are included. Jonathan, do you want to talk to that for a moment?
Yeah, sure. So, so there was 2 surveys that were able to be deployed, and they differed a little bit. So, with one of them, it did go into the longevity of an employee, so it was a little bit more rigorous. The other one did not. So, as far as the specifics, though, we still have yet to do the main data mining in that. We've mostly just the states that have returned data to us. We've sort of cleaned that up and let them know what that is. But there will be more data analysis forthcoming, probably in the next couple of months.
And this is Juliana. I can chime in on that. As far as some of the categories, I know we're looking at QCI, energy auditor, some of the major and installers, some of the major categories, and then I think also program like office staff. So we can confirm that a little bit more later, but hopefully that helps.
Okay, thanks. Maybe we could get a little more detailed look on an upcoming call, like how it's broken out.
Yeah, it's in the very initial stages of looking at the data, so we may actually still get a little bit more data in. You never know.
But
Okay.
you are right, it is tied to Davis-Bacon because we've got comparable titles potentially that some people with staff who are crew and others with subcontractors. So it is, your data results would be interesting and useful.
Yeah, so I think I hit all of the biggest things that came under ARA. I mean, we also, this whole group pulled together the standardized training curricula, but that kind of is part and parcel to the other pieces. Does anyone think of anything else that would help lend context to it? I just want to let people, I know we have a bunch of people who have joined within the last 8 years, so they didn't live through that. Am I forgetting anything?
The one thing I would just add is that I think there were some national publicity that was negative, but a bunch of us experienced a lot of real positive growth and capacity of our network to respond effectively. So I think it is a mixed story nationally.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Not just all bad by any means.
Yeah, and another thing that you did a lot of was a lot of train the trainer classes around the country.
Oh, yeah.
I think-
Propapalooza.
I think one thing also to keep in mind is that the way it went last time, first it was just kind of sheer madness as we drank water from a fire hose on steroids. And then we didn't really do what was needed to keep people. So we had all these people come in, but it didn't actually transform the industry in any way because at the end, we didn't have a plan to have people still have something to do, at least not enough of a plan. And it'd be really nice to actually have this be something this time that was sustained.
Yeah, I think there's an example, though, that by chance AEA did apply for and win a bunch of utility programs. So actually, we ramped up, hired a lot of people, and moved them on to utility programs. So I think it wasn't a national planning process, but it wasn't as if no one was able to take advantage of this and keep people employed. I can only speak for us. But I don't think we were unique.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, obviously when we're talking with DOE, we try to focus more about like what kind of support can be provided at the federal level, but we don't have to limit this conversation to that because I think you all could have really good ideas to share with each other about how this might look. So some of the common themes that I feel like come up all the time that I'd like to get your ideas on, and we might not have time to talk about all of them, but if something really is on your mind, if one of these topics jumps out at you, we can start there. So I think recruitment of the workforce is going to be an issue. In that same vein, we've been talking a lot about how to improve the diversity of our workforce so that it looks more like the people we serve. Then that after the big, huge funding goes the retention, keeping them through the funding is, while we have that big funding is great, but then what can we do to lay the groundwork for keeping at least, what does Chris Baker always say, like the 80% of your contractors do, no, how's it go? It's something about like 20-80, like you want to keep the good ones. Chris, are you here?
Right.
Oh, you are.
20% of our contractors do 80% of our work.
Right, so maybe we can't retain 100%, but we want to keep those 20% at least. And then I've also been thinking about ideas. I know last time, I mean, they seem to be being a little more reasonable this time in terms of how the funding will roll out and like giving us more time for planning and training at the beginning. If you remember last time, it was immediately like production, numbers. And it was super stressful and everyone was trying to like immediately jump in. It seems like this time we'll have a little more reasonable approach. So what could we do with that time to kind of streamline the process to like get up to that high production numbers without sacrificing quality or any of that? So I guess
Kelly, could I
And
add
then-
one more thing, and that is, I think the challenge, another big challenge is clarity from DOE about how the new money relates to the old money. And I think there was lack of consistency in the understanding of what the message was. And I think it's very important that a DOE message that goes out is clear and
Okay.
understandable.
That's good. I'll start kind of a list on the bottom as things come up about specifically what kind of stuff DOE could help clarify at the beginning.
I'd like to just ask Dave, what was unclear? Can you be more specific?
Well, let me put it this way. Some states, from my understanding, didn't have the same interpretation of how they deal with the underlying contract money that was in place for like 2009. You know, when do you spend what? And so some people spent some money first and other people spent other money first. Therefore, some more money was left over. Okay. And part of the whole myth that nobody spent their money on a timely basis.
Gotcha. So basically what their old contracts versus this new separate.
Right. So the underlying contract, some people thought, oh, I'll spend that down first and I'll leave my other money, my new money till later. And others, just different approaches to that thing. But the bottom line is some thought they were being smart by holding it. Then they made us all look bad by not having spent it.
Okay, got it.
So, okay, so in addition to, I think we could think about how are we going to recruit our staff, things that we could do to try and help keep them in the network, you know, as the industry as a whole. If there are any things we could do to streamline that process of getting them work ready and producing houses. And then, shoot, I keep thinking of one other one and then it escapes me when I go to type it down. Oh, just kind of, I want you all to be thinking as training providers, where you feel like, obviously providing training, but where else you feel like you might be able to step in and assist the network with the ramp up and the ramp down. Like one idea I've heard floated is that, you know, in some places there are shortages of quality control inspectors, or especially where there are a lot of smaller agencies that serve, you know, maybe less than one house a month in regular funding years. It's hard for them to keep a qualified QCI on staff, but if the training centers had qualified, certified QCIs on staff and could kind of hire them out as a service, that was just one idea.
Sorry to talk so much, but I want to add one more thing that was really critical for us. We had the advantage of being part of a team that got federal Department of Labor money also. And so we had a lot of wraparound services from allies. We had partners who really played a major role in helping us to assess and sort of and give support services to the incoming workers. And I think that is not automatically part of what technical training provides. And yet it was very important for us in getting good trainees.
So when you say wraparound
necessarily
services,
something that DOE is going to support, but we could try to bring in wraparound services and training assessment and adult education and et cetera, and job readiness skills, some money that supports the network bringing people in. I think it was really critical last time. I think it's very important this time.
I think that might fit well under the diversity recruitment, Kelly.
yeah, and I mean, even if we don't necessarily get Department of Labor funding, hopefully the grantees, we've been talking enough about training needs assessment and these other services you all can provide, and if they have this huge, finally have all the money to do what they might want to do, it's almost more about you all being poised to let them know that you offer those services.
Right. It's also having permission to use weatherization money in that way.
Do you think there's the conception that people think they aren't allowed to use weatherization money in that way?
Yes.
Okay.
Again, it's back to in my experience, different states have different interpretations of what different messages from DOE might mean.
No. Who's that? Okay, and I think that brings up another good point we've been talking about. I think we need more clarity, and DOE can help make this clear, that needs-based training is allowed. I think there's been so much concentration and misinterpretation of the comprehensive, specific Tier 1, Tier 2 that people think they can't do needs-based training, but they can. Okay.
Good point.
What do some others think? You're all pretty quiet today.
Hey, this is Ross. I think that we may need more of the services David's talking about than maybe we were in need last time, because we can anticipate the construction industry. As you know, last time we had the construction industry collapsing and workers with experience in the field ready for jobs, and I don't think we can expect that this time. So we're dealing with contractors now who are hiring people who've never swung a hammer, and it's just totally different than 2009.
Good point. Almost like pre-qualified.
I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah.
As we're looking around the country right now, we've got some, locals that are trying to get projects off the ground, and they're 6 or 8 months out on pouring a slab or getting a grader to show up to even do the groundwork. So
yeah,
construction industry is way up.
Nice office, Ross. Look like you're in a garden center.
Kelly, if you just throw this down, and we might be able to get some feedback from the group on it, but how we might be able to prepare grantees better for ramp up with multifamily, especially smaller multifamily. So not on high rises here, but we're talking about the low rise 25 unit or less buildings that all of our grantees have in their territory, which I think we learned last time around was critical to reaching production goals, was being able to start addressing those. Like how might we be able to facilitate that from the training center perspective, whether it's providing technical support or training or on the ground auditors and QCI to deal with that housing stock.
What do people think?
Yeah, that's good. Another thought, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about yesterday, Kelly, is perhaps the training center has experienced enough staff.
Speak up.
They could, perhaps the training
Yeah, you're a little faint, Chris. Can you put your mic closer or turn up the volume?
It's earbuds. I don't know what to do. Anyway, maybe the training centers have staff on board that could do the modeling for the auditors. In other words, the auditors collect the data, training centers do the modeling.
Yeah, right. So they could do field site data collection, hand off to WTC to run models, because then every agency doesn't have to have somebody who's trained and able to do that.
Yeah, if I could jump back in too on this one, I think the impression I have, and I know I don't have the breadth of experience with everybody statewide, nationally that you do, Kelly, but from different calls I've gotten and emails, including even today, okay, there are people who have not done many multis, and exactly how the states get approval to use a tool or not to use a tool has not been a slam dunk. It hasn't been simple. Okay. And so I think in order to somehow overcome those obstacles, there needs to be some real attempt to take that issue on. Okay. Particularly the 5 to 25 side, you know, that are.
So do you mean for the grantees to submit and get their audit approved?
Right. That process has not been a simple one, and people who are not experienced in it find that a barrier. And so I think in policy terms, I guess it has to be addressed. And I think training centers could be helpful in the solution, but there needs to be a policy context, you know, so. To permit agencies to do that work, or states to allow it and agencies to do it.
Caleb, is there any more clarity you think would be helpful on that topic?
I think that the biggest hurdle that we've seen for grantees coming in is just a complete and total lack of any policies or procedures for how they're going to do small multifamily. So they come in with the perspective of, I've got this, 2-page administrative manual on how I do single family housing, and they don't understand the concept of the sampling requirements, the different QCI requirements, the larger contracting requirements. Kind of, they just don't have the policy to handle it, so they kind of come in blind to that. And WPN 19.4 outlines that those policies and procedures have to be in place for all housing stocks that they're seeking approval for. I think that's been the biggest thing that we've seen, that they don't have the policy and procedure together. And so if they don't have that basis, DOE is not going to probably approve their submittals until they can provide that. So I think that that's a spot where the training centers can probably pitch in to create a more structured outline for everything from intake through audit through the QCI portion.
But it's not just their policies, it's also the approval of an audit tool. Or at least the recognition that they're approved to allow multifamily audits to be done.
I mean, and the list in attachment 3 and 4 of 19-4 clearly outline tools that are already approved.
I'm just saying I've gotten complaints for people who can't get through that process. So they may be wrong in but that's what they complained.
Good. Okay.
I think Chris is really spot on in a lot of ways. And Illinois, we've got like 30 agencies that might consider doing one multifamily a year. And it's not just about policies. It's about, if you're doing it once a year, you're never going to remember all the stuff. And so they end up being afraid to do it. In policy or not, they're kind of afraid to start touching it because there's a lack of confidence. And so I know this is a conversation we're having in Illinois about having our group take on some of that service, be the modeler for most of the agencies, for example. So I think there are going to be some places where it really is kind of what Dave is saying, but I think there's a whole swath of America that's much more of just too small and don't do enough of it to have it be something they're comfortable with.
We used to have that in New Mexico, but what's happened here now is that we have one agency and all it does is multifamily for the state, and then we have the other agencies doing single family. So that's another option.
The other thing that we found in New York is kind of the 2 to 4 multi-unit. Row house is the most underserved group in a program that tends to be looking at nationally at 5 and above or single family. And 2 to 4 unit or 2 to 10 unit or whatever rentals are are sort of underserved and potentially a large part of the market in a lot of places and looking at the equity issue, we've got to address that population.
Yeah, good point. I wanted to just check with, so Caleb, with this idea of if an agency or a grantee went out and did they did the eligibility stuff and they did the field site data collection on the multifamily, and then they had a contract with a training center that then ran the energy model, what would that, like, to get their energy audit, multifamily energy audit approved through the process that people go through now, what would that look like? Would it still come from the state, or would there be a way for a training provider to kind of lead that and then just have the grantee do the official kind of submission?
Sure, yeah, the grantee is open to use any services, whether it's training center or private consultant, to develop a procedure and policies for them. And then the grantee simply has to bring those to DOE and present them as their policies for this particular housing stock and or modeling tool to be used. So the grantee has to submit it, but we highly recommend anytime if you don't have the capacity within the grantee to handle it, then reach out to the training centers or consulting company that is capable of providing you with that support so you can develop something.
Oops. Uh-oh. Hello?
We still hear you.
Oh, okay. Weird. Looks like I stopped sharing. Oh, it says.
We can still see it.
Really?
So
okay, I guess it just quit on my computer.
Says you have low bandwidth, Kelly.
Shows that you have low bandwidth, yeah.
Oh, I'll stop my video. That should help. Thanks. Okay, I'm glad I dialed in instead of using my computer. So just trust me that I am, so can you still see the notes then?
Yes.
Okay. Weird. It says it wants me to start it again, but I don't want to kick everybody off. All right, so if it's not actually sharing my live screen, just trust that I'm taking notes as we go. Caleb, I can't see the chat either. I'm scared to start it again. I just worry that it will
It
kick
says
everybody
we're
off.
viewing your screen, actually.
Huh.
Your screen may be frozen, Kelly.
That's what I think. Do you see the squirrel again now?
No, move your mouse. Can you move your mouse? If your mouse doesn't move for us, it's frozen.
Yeah, I think that it kicked me off, and I Caleb, can you just take over the as presenter and stop sharing or whatever?
Yep, give me just a second.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it kicked me off while it was still sharing. My screen isn't frozen, obviously, but you can't see it. But trust that I'm capturing your ideas. Just if you do send it in chat, send it to Caleb, and he can let me know. What else are people thinking? I think, I mean, with retention, obviously the idea of going for utility programs is good. Any other thoughts on how you could how we could help people maintain the good new staff that they get?
Kelly, this is Tom Price.
Hey, Tom.
How you doing?
All right. Surviving.
Good. So I was just going to throw this out there, something that other industries often use is the career centers at universities. They can be excellent tools for finding people that have the skill. Can you hear me now?
Yep,
muted.
I can hear
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Career centers at universities and sometimes even community colleges have those. That's a good point.
Yeah, and to develop a internship model that to where that's part of the whole process of recruiting new people.
You guys hear me any better now? This is Chris.
Yeah.
You sound like you're sitting like across the room from.
We can hear you though, Chris.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. So another thought on retention is, obviously, you know, if you have local utility programs that they can transition to, that's great. But for those that don't, maybe it's time for us to start teaching agencies that are interested in fee-for-service work so they can maintain staff after that.
Ooh, I like that.
I just want to add along those lines. We've lost a few auditors in our area to engineering firms that are doing new construction blower door testing for code compliance. And so there are pathways into, you know, careers in the industry or outside the industry that are worth considering.
And who's that?
This is Ross.
Okay, I thought so, but I can't see anyone's name or face or flowers anymore.
You got a great background there, Ross.
Thanks. I'm just in my yard.
One thing, if I could add, that we have not, I haven't heard us discuss yet, and that is the union issue. The last time we did have, LIUNA was fairly aggressive and ultimately got very much involved in helping to create a national weatherization worker designation that it landed at different rates in different places, I guess, and to different effects. But I think it is important that we remember that this is part of the environment. We need to, I think, come to terms with exactly what is our relationship with the unions.
Yeah, this is John Jones.
With,
I think, I was going to say that's one area that we really should be reaching out to before all this happens, so that we're not scrambling trying to make relations afterwards. I think it's really important to engage those organizations like LIUNA and others early on in the process.
And since LIUNA did get a designation, went through a long process to do it, and we should in some way or another start there, I think.
So just to give a little background, I've been working on this stuff for a while, and they did come up with a time-based apprenticeship model for the installer, but it hasn't really gained any traction. What's happening is kind of similar to what you're saying, Ross. The one training center that is focused on this, and they also have the laborers, that's also like a union designation, so in addition to WAP, just for construction in general. But it's so intense. It's like 2,000 hours worth of training, and what he finds is he'll get someone through kind of the baseline of the OSHA, the lead safe, the other kind of really baseline stuff of training, and then someone from one of the better paid trades swoops in and says, hey, why are you doing this for a $9 an hour job? Why don't you come work with me, plumbing, before long you'll be making $60 an hour, or an electrician, because it gets, so he's like, basically, he feels like he's acting like a feeder mechanism for the other trades. So that's where some of that is. I finally made a contact at the national level of the LIUNA training network, and because I thought for this group it might be really helpful. They have these training centers in parts of the country that we don't have brick and mortar training centers. And since they train construction labor, they'll have all the tools we would need to go in and build props and do training. But he said it's not really it's like us all, it's not a big national thing. It's up to reaching out to each individual regional center to see if they would be interested in some kind of space sharing. Like, instead of you going to New Hampshire and having to rent a warehouse or a conference space or bring a big trailer, you could go and use their training center as your kind of class indoor area.
So Kelly, how does that sort of go side by side with the whole badging, getting away from having to rent huge spaces and have people come in and do a whole retrofit installer training with lots of props?
I think really it's just a matter of what different grantees or agencies decide to go with. If they want to have, like in ARA, remember a lot of people, when we're bringing on new staff, they would just do like a boot camp model.
Mm-hmm.
So if people wanted to do something like a boot camp, I think it might be helpful to have that center available to us in different parts of the country. If we're doing the badges, that was, and I like that model because it allows for more on-the-job production-based training and skills development. But I think it would probably be, those two would probably be separate from each other. I guess I mostly wanted to test the waters and see if any of you had talked to any of those union regional centers, or if you had any thoughts on that, if you think you might be interested if we were to go, because I could keep the conversation going with Jim.
So we're certainly interested in New York, and so let's follow up. We've worked with Liona in the past, and Anna Sullivan, who was at AEA at the time, we went to their training center in, it was Connecticut or Massachusetts, in the Northeast.
Connecticut.
Physically.
Yep, Connecticut.
Yeah. So, and I think they're going to be interested this time, and they are part of, this. So that reference to being pushed off or seeing opportunities at other unions, I think if you begin to work with Liona, the laborers, I think those other relationships are possible as well. But I think Liona would be a good place to start. And if you're dealing with them nationally, we should talk.
Okay. Yeah, I think the thing I always run up against is the apprenticeship model, like the time-based apprenticeship model, is just too unwieldy for such a low-paying job, and we can't really do anything about the wages until we disconnect the cost-effectiveness guideline from what we can pay workers. So that's where I end up chasing my tail when I get in these conversations.
I don't want to get into it now, but we got an approved apprenticeship in New York, and exactly that problem. 2,000 plus hours of instruction was too much. We didn't need it. So we didn't, even though we got it approved, we decided to go another on-the-job training, initial training and on-the-job training direction instead of apprenticeship.
Well, and the thing is, there is another model of apprenticeship called a competency-based apprenticeship, which the Badges Toolkit is, in effect, a competency-based apprenticeship. It's there, but, somebody still at the local level needs to...
Has Department of Labor approved it?
Yeah, we had calls with them. We were developing the competency model. We showed them the Badges Toolkit. They're the ones who told me, oh, this is basically a competency-based apprenticeship model, but they need... it needs to be sponsored, and then someone has to track it. So that's not something DOE can do.
Let's follow up, because we're more than willing. We've gone through that process. I would love to work with you, and I'm sure that several of us nationally would.
Okay. Okay. What else? Let's talk a little bit. Do people have any ideas about how you as training providers, or, those of you who aren't training providers, what we could be laying the groundwork for to kind of streamline the process? The one idea, I'll just kind of seed it, was if WTCs have certified QCIs on staff to kind of rent out or mentor even. Any other ideas? What would help us help the boots on the ground get stuff done correctly and quickly?
Hi, this is Arnie. It's not a new idea, but I just want to add, I think that's a great idea for training centers to have that. with our smaller agencies, when they lose a QCI, the process to get one back is so long that, they run into a lot of trouble. They can't just, go to a job website, hiring website and find another QCI inspector. There's only so many, period, in the state of North Carolina right now.
Yeah.
So we are actually doing a training / renting kind of situation with community housing partners. So I think they're getting ready to possibly do some final inspections for us. The issue with that is North Carolina does not have their own training center. And so nobody's fault. Some of the rules are slightly different in Virginia than they are in North Carolina. So that's the only reason we're kind of working through that right now.
Oh, I know. That's the thing that's been making me just a teeny tiny bit of heartburn of that idea too, is if we position ourselves to do that, we have to make sure that each of you training providers who decide to offer that service, we have to be really clear and consistent about, for that QCI, when you go to this state, here is their field guide, here are their rules, this is what you inspect to here. When you cross the state line, here is their field guide. It shouldn't be that different, but yeah, that can cause some trouble, especially with subspaces. I think subspaces get people all mixed up.
Kelly, this is Chris Clay.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, I just want to mention too that, you mentioned the word mentoring or whatever, for the QCI. The QCI is the end of the story. We really need to work on, if we're going to mentor, maybe mentor auditors too, and mentor technicians, because we want the work done correctly from the start, rather than, if we come over to Ernie's place and start inspecting his stuff there, if it's wrong, he's just going to look at us like, oh God, those guys come here and they tell us everything's wrong. And it's, not everything, Ernie, but how that goes, right? Because I've seen those situations where QCIs come from out of the system and they're even using their field guide, but I don't know, they're not used to how they do it there.
Yeah, that's one reason we haven't done it yet. We just want to make sure that we don't do this. And next thing you know, our agencies are so bogged down in going back to houses that it kills the production. Even though, if it's wrong, it's wrong. But yeah, it may not be wrong in our state. And so we're going really carefully on this one.
Right.
There's one other issue that I want to raise, but you can shut it off if you don't think it's appropriate at this time. And that is, for at least a lot of us in the cold climate heat pump arena of the Northeast and to some degree the Midwest, we're facing the electrification, getting off carbon, push in our states. And weatherization has got to be more clearly addressing, how do you do that and meet the SIR? How do you do that and have it be okay? How do you, that's a national issue that affects ultimately the need to do certain kinds of training for HVAC and for installation of air source heat pumps, for example. And right now it's not, and it entails fuel switching and SIR. Those are big DOE issues that this is not the place to drill down on it, but I think it's a place to remember that's an issue.
Yeah, I'm making notes down in the bottom here. I'm glad you guys brought up the energy audits, because I know, we have a couple minutes left. One thing that we didn't get to that I had also hoped to talk about is, Chris, I agree 100%. Like in ARA, we focused on QCI because they were that last and before we got the horrible press for, in having just bad quality work out there. But now, to me, the next natural step is if we have time and resources to focus on it, the next step would be on that energy auditor and the energy modeling and making sure, is the right work even being called for in the first place? because I think that the field site data collection, I feel like we're pretty solid. Like our techs, our auditors in general know how to run the diagnostics and get the data. But then the energy modeling part, if any of you have any ideas, just toss them out there. What could we do to help make sure, help bolster, I guess, the quality and consistency of the actual energy modeling so that the right work is getting called for?
Hey, Kelly, this is Tom again.
Hey.
So I've been teaching energy modeling for the past several months, and now I've come to the realization that the big thing that distinguishes people that do really well in energy modeling from those that don't is just a basic understanding of geometry. And so that seems like a good thing to keep in mind when we're recruiting. The people who have that skill and are able to calculate square footages of complex shapes, that's kind of like the kernel from which everything else grows.
Okay.
Good point.
Kelly, hi, this is Melissa Cusson with Green Jobs Academy. I was wondering if it had come up previously, and I apologize because I missed the first couple of minutes just getting on, about hybrid learning or sharing best practices as we still kind of live in the pandemic world where not everyone's comfortable coming to in-person trainings, and where it's possible to train remotely, at least for a portion. It's kind of why I said hybrid. What are we doing for that? Are we able to share best practices internally, or are there resources that we should be leveraging?
This group is definitely here to share as a peer group to share best practices, and maybe we could talk about that on a future call if people are interested. It would be nice to get a better kind of lay of the land before we jump into this. Thank you for that idea. It kind of reminded me, actually, I did have one update at the beginning, and I forgot, and I understand we're going a little over, so if you have to jump off, that's fine. We've recorded this, but we just finished our first online instructional design workshop, the one that we did previously as a 4.5-day in-person. We just finished it. It was 6 or 7 weeks, but with a bonus week in the middle, where the learners went through the materials, and then we had a live 90-minute session each week where everyone was there in real time, but everything else was just kind of on your own time, posting things, providing feedback, sharing, and it was a great success. And we're going to have a second session in the summer, but we've had some attrition since people first applied, so we're going to open that application up again, and I think it's this week or next week. Be on the lookout for that. It's best for people who have some experience already developing training. From the couple people that were really new, they said it was a little bit overwhelming, so I'll put all that in the invite. But yeah, that's also kind of a hybrid model, just in that it's synchronous and asynchronous. Yeah. All right. Thank you all for all of your ideas. Caleb, if you got any stuff in the chat, please send it my way and I'll add it to the notes. This is just the beginning of the conversation. I think we should keep thinking and let me know what comes to your mind. This is also that Training Center Summit that Juliana mentioned at the beginning of the call. This is going to be a big topic there. Thinking about this, thinking about if we dust off the quality work plan, WPN 15.4, and update it, what kind of changes could we make to it, to help, remove any hurdles or barriers that we may have inadvertently put in the way for people. So I really value the input from this group. So thank you for participating, and I look forward to talking with you again next month. Watch out for crazy squirrels.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Have a good week.
You too. Bye.
Aye.